All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a literally invisible psychological weapon. I mean, it secretly controls almost every single social interaction you have. It dictates how you shop, how you relate to total strangers, and exactly why you sometimes walk away with things you didn't even want to buy in the first place. You see, society actually programs us, basically from birth, with this deep, almost obsessive obligation to repay what other people give us. It's an idea beautifully captured by Ralph Waldo Emerson: pay every debt as if God wrote the bill. It is a heavy, almost sacred social contract that we all abide by. To demystify this invisible force, we're looking at the absolutely phenomenal research of Dr. Robert Cialdini. In his groundbreaking book, he details how he actually went undercover for years, infiltrating sales organizations, fundraising groups, advertising agencies, the whole shebang. Why? Well, because he was tired of constantly falling for these tricks himself, and he wanted to discover exactly how compliance professionals get us to say yes.
So here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We're looking at 1. The rule of reciprocitation. 2. The trap of uninvited debts. 3. Triggering unfair exchanges. 4. The power of reciprocal concessions. 5. The rejection then retreat technique. And finally, 6. How to defend yourself. We're going to take you step by step through the anatomy of this psychological trap so you can spot it in the wild.
Kicking things off with Section 1, the rule of reciprocation, the old give and take. To show you just how deep this rule runs, let's look at a mind-blowing historical example. In 1985, Ethiopia was suffering from crushing poverty, a ruined economy, and a truly brutal famine. People were literally starving. Yet, despite these horrific conditions, Ethiopia took what little money they had and sent thousands of dollars in relief aid all the way to Mexico after an earthquake. Why? Purely because Mexico had sent aid to Ethiopia a half-century earlier, in 1935 when Italy invaded them. Think about that. A 50-year-old debt repaid across the globe by a starving nation. That is the undeniable power of this rule. So what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway is this definition. The rule of reciprocity is our hardwired social obligation to try to repay, in kind, what another person has provided us. It's actually an evolutionary survival mechanism. It's what allowed our human ancestors to share food and skills without the fear of losing them. And because of this, society trains us from childhood to comply. If we don't, we face intense social pressure. Nobody wants to be ostracized as a moocher or an ingrate, right? We hate the idea of taking without giving back. But what happens when this polite social contract gets hijacked? That brings us to Section 2, the trap of uninvited debts, the power of gifts. Picture this. You're walking hurriedly through a busy airport terminal. Suddenly, a robed stranger from the Hare Krishna Society steps right into your path and pins a flower to your jacket. You didn't ask for it, you definitely don't want it, and you are totally caught off guard. Here is exactly how they execute this tactic. Step 1, they force a gift on you, the flower. If you try to give it back, they hit you with Step 2. They refuse to take it. They'll say something like, "It is our gift to you." Well, now you're physically holding the flower. The rule of reciprocation has just been triggered in your brain, even though you never invited this favor. Then comes Step 3. They ask for a donation. By refusing to take that flower back, the solicitor traps you in an uninvited debt. You feel forced to hand over $1 or $2 just to escape the agonizing social awkwardness of walking away with something for nothing. And the wildest part? Most people would just immediately throw the flower into the nearest trash can, but the tactic still worked perfectly. Which leads us to Section 3. Triggering unfair exchanges, unequal returns. Get this, 500%. That is the massive return on investment seen in a famous psychology experiment. An assistant named Joe did a small, totally unsolicited favor for a subject. He brought them an unasked-for 10-cent bottle of Coca-Cola. Later on, Joe asked the subject to do him a favor and buy some 50-cent raffle tickets. Just think about the math there for a second. The subjects who got the tiny 10-cent Coke bought twice as many tickets as those who got nothing. Joe spent 10 cents and walked away with 50 cents. That's a 500% return, all born from one microscopic, uninvited favor. So why on earth do we agree to this kind of raw deal? Well, we face two immense pressures. First, there's the internal emotional discomfort of feeling beholden to someone. Second, there's the external social shame of being labeled a Welsher by our peers. This creates an overwhelming desire to just relieve the psychological burden, even if it costs us way more than we originally got. This perfectly explains a rather tragic anecdote from the source material. A young woman let a stranger jumpstart her car. To relieve her heavy burden of debt to this supposedly helpful person, a month later she actually lent this underage, uninsured stranger her brand new car. And yep, he promptly totaled it. The cost of relieving our social debt can be staggeringly unfair. Moving right along to Section 4, the power of reciprocal concessions, illusion of compromise. This trap gets even sneakier when manipulators use the illusion of compromise instead of a physical gift. Dr. Cialdini himself fell for this one. He was approached on the street by a Boy Scout who tried to sell him a $5 ticket to a circus. Cialdini flatly refused. But then the Boy Scout said, well, if you don't want to buy any tickets, how about buying some of our big chocolate bars? They're only $1 each. Cialdini bought 2 on the spot, and he didn't even like chocolate bars.
How does that even happen? It basically boils down to a concession for a concession. Because the Boy Scout retreated from a large request, the $5 ticket, to a small request, the $1 candy, Cialdini's brain perceived that retreat as a favor. It felt like a concession, and thanks to the rule of reciprocation, he was socially obligated to make a concession in return. His concession? Moving from no to yes on the smaller item just to meet the kid halfway.
Now, for the really heavy hitter, Section 5, the rejection then retreat technique, the ultimate weapon. This is the absolute weaponization of this role. A master manipulation tactic used everywhere from door-to-door sales to major political events like the Watergate scandal. The steps are elegantly simple but devastatingly effective. Step 1. Make an extreme first request that you know is going to be rejected. Step 2. Expect that rejection. Step 3. Retreat to the smaller request, which, by the way, is what you actually wanted all along. Step 4. Trigger compliance. The target sees your retreat as a concession, and they feel obligated to concede in return. It's a literal heads-I-win, tails-you-lose scenario. What makes it so brilliant is that it expertly forces the target to feel responsible for dictating the final agreement. Because they said no to the first offer, they feel like they successfully negotiated you down. It gives them this false sense of control that actually makes them more satisfied with the final outcome. A university study brilliantly illustrates just how wild this is in practice. When college students were asked directly to spend a day chaperoning juvenile delinquents at the zoo, only 17% agreed. But when they were first asked to commit to a massive 2-year counseling program, which they all reasonably rejected, and then asked to do the zoo trip as a retreat, the success rate skyrocketed. It literally tripled to 50%. And here's the thing. The rejection then retreat technique is supercharged by another psychological quirk called the perceptual contrast principle. By slapping a huge request right in front of a small one, the brain gets tricked into seeing the second option as incredibly small. It's exactly why a $95 sweater suddenly looks super cheap if a salesman shows it to you right after you just bought a $495 suit. Your brain compares the two, and the contrast makes that smaller number feel like a totally painless concession. Which brings us to our final stop, Section 6. How to defend yourself, neutralize the rule. So, how do we protect our wallets and our sanity against these jujitsu compliance tricks? I mean, you can't just reject every single favor or you'll become a bitter hermit who never accepts a kind gesture. The real cure requires a careful mental reframing. Basically, you accept a first offer in good faith. But if the person follows up their favor with a request to buy a product or sign a contract, you immediately redefine their gift in your mind as a compliance device. And this logic right here is your absolute shield. The rule says that favors are to be met with favors. It does not require that tricks be met with favors. Once you make that mental shift, boom, the psychological burden evaporates. You are completely free to accept a free fire extinguisher or a home inspection from a shady salesman, smile, and politely show him out the door without buying a single thing. You aren't being rude, you are literally just exploiting the exploiter. So, you've learned how to deflect these external gifts. But what happens when you make a choice and your very own brain traps you into defending it, even when it's completely wrong? That leads us directly to the hobgoblins of the mind, which we're going to unravel in our next explainer on the terrifying invisible power of commitment and consistency. You absolutely will not want to miss it. See you then.